Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet?
I love people as I meet them one by one. People are just wonderful as individuals. You see the whole...
My great aspiration, my greatest ambition is to be so good. Now, in that way, I'm tiresome, as I suppose, to live with, because I want to be a fantastic human being.
I am the greatest. We're not disputing that, Cassius, but how does Sonny Liston feel about it? He can't feel but one way, and let's take everything I say and like it. Because February the 25th, I'm going to take back my job. I'm the champ. He's no champ. He's a tramp. When you see men fall, don't laugh. Learn. Learn. Because you're on your way up. And the things that tempt people to fall, you and I are not free from that temptation.
By examining his own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the course of the Cold War.
Art muscle. It was a way of making me feel that they were a part of me.
You see it on the bridge. Wait, how they get it? If the government had to change the screw in the bridge, they had to shut it down. They got state troopers out there. They got lanes closed. They got their own strange machines. How did they get up there?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Peace and blessings to everybody here tonight. I hope you are warm. Hope you are comfortable. You know what time it is. Before we get started with the show, I just want to give a shout out to everybody in the building. Poets, writers, all of you. Thank you for spending time with us over here. Do me a solid. Make sure that you go and support the Woman of the Hour. This is one of the shows where we sit back and we learn something new. Give her a warm welcome. I will be in the audience with the rest of you, soaking in this information. Leave your questions, your comments. Give a warm welcome and a round of applause for Miss Sydney Linguist.
Hello.
Hold up. All right.
How are you doing?
I am good. Just trying to stay warm.
Meanwhile, it is hot and humid here today. Nothing like a hot, humid December.
The irony in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been seeing all sorts of winter warnings for the Great Lakes area and the East Coast. So I've been wondering if you're getting all that. So
Yeah, it's here and there. It kind of started off tricky this morning, and then as the sun went down, it got cooler. So that's always fun.
yeah.
Well, look, I'm gonna kick back in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna give you the floor and let you do your thing, and yeah, let's get it.
All right. So I have a lot to cover today. There's a lot of stats that I've been coming up on. I wanted to do this post today, or this stream today on the sixth mass extinction, which is what the scientists are basically labeling this time period that we're in, because currently humans have been basically the cause for a wide swath of all life on Earth disappearing. This topic idea was initially triggered by a video I saw recently, which this is something that I've always kind of understood and noticed in my own life. But this video for me was really eye-opening in the sense that everyone else is starting to see it too. This man lives in the not Midwestern, but like I think he said North, maybe Kentucky. I think he lives in like the Appalachia region. And he is an avid birder. He watches birds. He sets up stuff in his backyard for birds, and he has feeders set up for them. And that particular area is very important for the ecosystem, particularly in North America, because birds migrate from Canada to Mexico and back. And that region is a really important thoroughfare for birds, for insects, for all the other animals that rely on each other. We'll have to keep in mind throughout this whole stream that everything's interconnected and every living thing relies on other living things to survive. Most animals, most plants are specialized to interact with certain species. And so the loss of some is going to affect others as well. So we can't think of them in a vacuum. We do have to consider that all of these animals are interrelated, intermingling. Anyway, this person was talking about how this year the birds did not show up. He put out his bird feeders, he put out the seed, and it hasn't been touched. The animals have, the birds that typically would come through, cardinals, jays, finches, you name it, they haven't been showing up. And he's been seeing a couple here and there, but he has not been seeing the return of the birds like he expected to every single year. And the comments were filled with people who were commenting on the same things. He ended up making a second video just to address all of these comments that he was getting about how people are no longer seeing these animals. And so that triggered me to want to do this episode because this is something that I've grown up noticing as well. I grew up in the Bay Area of California, San Jose, which if you're not familiar with that area, it's between Sacramento or San Francisco and Monterey. We're kind of inland. We're not by the ocean. We're on the other side of the hills from the ocean. But there's still a lot of natural habitat around us. We have redwood forests that are only like a 20-minute drive from us. We also have wetlands that are also within like 15-20-minute drive from us. Back in the 50s and before, most of that region were just vineyards, fruit trees, like plums and apricots, peaches, all kinds of warm weather fruits. And it was a very productive region. It was very, there was a lot of fruit and vegetable commodities that came out of that region because that whole area were wetlands. And so wetland soil tends to be very nutrient rich and whatnot. But because of all of the diverse ecosystems around us, we used to get a lot of different animals. I used to, as a kid, go out in the yard and we'd get butterflies. Because we're in California, we would see the monarchs that would migrate from CAC. I remember I used to find grasshoppers and crickets. At night, you'd always hear the chirping of the crickets. We used to get skunks, raccoons. occasional like owls and hawks, vultures, all sorts of different animals coming through even our own backyard, even though it was like more of a suburban area. We would even accidentally find rats and like smaller animals, possums, coming through our area from time to time as well. I also grew up going to farms from 10 to probably college. I worked on horse ranches, and then I also in high school worked on an agricultural farm. So I got to see a whole variety of different creatures, animals, mantises, ladybugs, bees, you name it. And I remember, especially as a kid, you'd see all these animals, but I remember starting to notice, especially towards high school, I wasn't seeing a lot of these animals anymore. And even now, when I visit my mom's house, you can't hear crickets anymore. There are no longer crickets. There aren't gnats flying around in the backyard. You don't see this whole diversity of bug life that was once there. I also distinctly remember when I was 5, we drove from San Jose to Los Angeles to go to Disneyland, and we had to clean off the car multiple times because there's just bugs all over the windshield. And that does not happen anymore. My husband and I have driven to Texas multiple times, and there were barely any bugs. We've driven back to San Jose from here and to Sacramento, and barely any bugs. And this is not an isolated experience. There are researchers that are finding this. There are people with just regular experiences in their own lives finding this. One of the videos I was watching before this stream, he mentioned that specifically, how when he went on trips, he used to find bugs all over the windshield and nothing anymore, or very little. He also referenced his own experience with fireflies, how there used to be a bunch of fireflies where he used to live, and now it's like a shooting star, where if you see one, you're overwhelmed with excitement because they aren't around anymore. And this is an indication of a much larger problem that has been ongoing for decades. And it's unfortunately a sign of things that are to come, because this isn't just affecting bugs. This isn't just affecting birds. This is affecting all species on the planet. Arguably, I'd say that we are an invasive species, which is a huge component to population decline. Invasive species are very successful in reducing populations in locations. One particular example is in Australia. They're having a huge issue with their mammal population loss. About 21% of their mammals are threatened, and most of that is caused by cats or other feral species, dogs, and I think they're also having an issue with pigs or something like that. But cats are a big issue because they're hunting a lot of those smaller animals that they rely on in their ecosystem. And then also they pass diseases and all that fun stuff. They also wipe out the natural prey animals of the larger predators that do live there. And as I said, this is not an isolated incident. This is not happening just in North America. This is not happening just to bugs. This is happening across the entire globe. In the past 5 centuries, at least 900 species of animals have gone extinct, which is probably an underestimate, because we had up until like the 1890s-ish, we didn't really have very accurate ways to measure populations. We didn't really know that much back then, and we didn't really exactly have the tools to do so. So we've probably lost more than that. Recent work has suggested that about 41% amphibians, which is amphibians that we know about, species that we have already discovered, basically, 41% of amphibians, 27% of mammals, 21% of reptiles, and 13% of birds are facing the threat of extinction. Currently, vertebrates, animals with backbones, which include birds, which include reptiles, amphibians, mammals, fish, they're facing an extinction rate 35 times the rate of the last million years. And that's been in the last couple hundred years, which makes it, with exception to the meteor impact event that killed the dinosaurs 66 million years ago, this is the fastest extinction event in Earth's history. And the dinosaur extinction event killed 96% of species on the planet. So we are besting a meteor in 200 years. Not a good comparison. We're more successful than a giant rock from space. Cool. We have been directly responsible for the destruction of countless genera, which is basically an example of a genus would be Panthera, which includes like lions, tigers, panthers, stuff like that, which are within the Felis family, just to kind of give you an idea where that is on the tree. So we have wiped out like entire groups of species. They've estimated about 27 just for birds, I believe. And some of the extinction rates that we're seeing would normally take 18,000 years or more, but we're doing this in a matter of decades. A global study that was recently done found that 71%, they were investigating 71,000 species, and they found that 48% of them are declining. Thankfully, 49% are stable so far, but only 3% are increasing in numbers. So still half of the population, almost half the population of 71,000 species is declining, and only a small fraction are actually increasing. And I'd almost argue that some of those are probably not species that we want to increase. They're probably invasive type species like raccoons and deer and stuff that do damage to the ecosystem if we have too many of them. There are a lot of the species that as I kind of mentioned earlier, that are very specific. They have very specific niches. They have very specific purposes, and to lose them would mean entire populations of plants might not be able to be pollinated. You might have an entire food source disappear. So even though it's only it sounds terrible. Even though it's only 48%, that's still going to have massive ramifications for the remainder of the populations that do exist, because those are going to be food sources. Those are going to be balancing agents in a way. And they also provide other additional environmental services to us, to plants, to animals, whatnot. One example, small animals help with plant growth, because when they dig, it helps to aerate the soil, dig up the soil, and it makes it easier for plants to get their roots in and stuff like that. So besides being a food source, animals do have a really important part to play in the ecosystem. Another study, the Living Planet Index, which is provided by the Zoological Society in London. They track over 35,000 in vertebrate population. So again, lizards, reptiles, mammals, stuff like that. And they've found, they've followed around 5,495 species from 1970 to 2020. and they've seen extremely sharp declines, particularly in freshwater populations of up to 85%, as well as terrestrial populations have seen a decline of up to 69%, and marine animals in the ocean have seen a decline of about 56%. And it also does vary based on location. Even though there's been an overall decline of populations since 1970 up to 73%, Latin America and the Caribbean have especially been hit hard with a percent decrease in the last 50 years. Africa has seen a 76% decline. Asia, the Asian Pacific region has seen a 60% decline. North America has seen a 39% decline, and Europe and Central Asia has declined. And as of June 2023, the IUCN lists 233 mammalian species as critically endangered, while 27% of all mammalian species are threatened with extinction. Scientists use different levels for in how endangered they are. Critically endangered means there's so few species that they probably need human intervention to help their populations restore. Where something that's threatened with extinction, their numbers are declining, but they're more or less stable. An example of animals that are threatened with extinction would be elephants. They're not critically endangered, but they are endangered. Somebody that would be critically endangered would be, say, the white rhino, which are being actively hunted and are almost on the verge of extinction because of the tusk trade. So different animals are under different levels of threat, but overall, a wide variety of creatures across the entire planet are facing some level of endangerment because of our actions. And it's, poaching is a huge component. There's a whole bunch of reasons why these animals are being affected right now. Some of the big causes of these declines is, one of the biggest is habitat destruction. Obviously, over the past 100 years, and even before then, humans have come in and we've raised habitats, we have destroyed forests, we've polluted the existing land, cutting down forests, destroying beaches, you name it. Like whatever we can do to make the land ours is going to destroy the planet or destroy those areas for what should be living there. And that's a huge component, because not only does it completely destroy the entire area and forces them out, oftentimes the animals have to flee and find new places to live. It can expose them to us, and we're more likely to hunt them because we don't want them there. It also can be from like side effects from the habitat destruction, where we have destroyed the plants that they eat, or the trees that they used to live in, or we accidentally ruin the water sources that they were using. But habitat destruction is one of the biggest contributors to population decline. It also increases competition within animal species when you are destroying entire swaths of the ecosystem. Like take the Brazilian rainforest, the Amazon rainforest. When you cut that forest down and take more and more away from it, animals are confined into a smaller and smaller region. And when you have many, many animals being confined in a smaller and smaller region, there are going to be more infighting between actual species, more like interspecies competition for mating and all that stuff for habitat. But then also you have higher likelihood of exposure. So predator prey animals, diseases are going to spread more rapidly because they're in closer contact. And as I said, they're also going to be competing for fewer amounts of resources, fewer amount of food available, fewer amount of places to hide, to live. So habitat destruction is one of the biggest. Purposeful killing is also a huge component, which would go along with what you said, poaching. Also, as you said, the pesticides. We're killing things indiscriminately, especially bugs. The fact that we spray all of our food with it, we spray ourselves with it, we put all manner of chemicals out into the environment to keep bugs away from us. But obviously, just because you're spraying for mosquitoes, you're going to also be taking out beetles and grasshoppers, ladybugs, butterflies. Butterflies are extremely affected by these pollutants, and as well as bees. A lot of these really important pollinators are being wiped out by the same pesticides we're using to get rid of pests. And then there's also the secondary impact of, like, you spray it on the plants and it goes into the plant life. It goes into the flesh of the plants, into the soil. And a lot of these chemicals are what are called forever chemicals, where it takes so long for them to break down, and then their components are so resistant to other methods of breaking down. Like, they don't break down in heat, they don't break down with water, they don't break down in a typical organic manner. And so it can persist in the soil for generations. They just recently found off the coast of Monterey DDT persisting in the soil because they dumped DDT barrels off the coast, and this was like decades ago, and it's still leaching DDT into the water. And DDT is incredibly harmful. This is one of the chemicals that really inspired Rachel Carson's novel, Silent Spring, because it's basically a biocide. It kills anything that has a nervous system. And because it lasts so long in the soil, in the air, anything that touches it, anything that eats it, is going to either get sick, get cancers, or they're going to die, depending on how big of a dose you got. One of the most iconic stories, at least to me, that when I read the book, was a father had just sprayed his plants with these pesticides back in like the 50s. And he left the empty canister in the barn, and his I don't know, I think he was 2 or 3 year old boy came in there and he put his hand on it. He didn't even play with it. He just put his hand on it, and he died the next day. And this is stuff that we spray on plants. This is stuff that we in not Middle Eastern, Asian countries right now. I forgot exactly which one it was. I want to say it was Thailand, but it might have been somewhere else. I've been hearing a lot of warnings for travelers because they've been using a certain chemical to spray onto bed sheets to kill bed bugs. But if you lay in the bed with that spray, you can die. And they had a recent story of 2 girls went overseas, and they were staying at this hotel, and the 2 girls were found dead in their beds, and the 2 boys were suspected of killing them. But then the boys were saying no, we were feeling sick too. Maybe it was a restaurant that we went to, but then they ended up testing it and they found out it was the bed sheets, that it had soaked into their skin. And it was just the guys got lucky because they didn't stay in the beds as long, I guess. But it's not an isolated incident. This has happened multiple times over the past year that I've read about. We apply to our food, to the land, to our bed sheets, to keep the bugs away or to keep other creatures away. And it's having fatal consequences to us, to the creatures that rely on the land, and we're consuming it as well. Like, this stuff does not just go away. And so if you spray pesticides on food, it's going to be in the food, and you're going to end up eating those pesticides. So the use of pesticides is a huge issue that is still a problem to this day. Even though they've done work, like Rachel Carson did motivate huge movements to reduce the types of pesticides that were used, the strength of them. There's still new chemicals being developed every single day that are not being monitored, especially with other countries. They have less regulations. And I mean, even in our own country, we're starting to lose a lot of those existing regulations. So it's becoming a very dangerous problem, especially given the fact that it does persist in the soil, persist in the food, in our bodies for generations. And we might not even know what the effects are until people start getting sick years in the future. Like, we didn't really understand the impact of radiation for a really long time until I think it was triggered by women that would paint watches. They painted the hands with uranium paint because it would glow. It would make it glow. And they would like lick the tips of their paintbrushes to get it wet when they were painting. And all of these women would start coming in with like lip cancers, mouth cancer, like these massive sores on their face. And I think that was what triggered them to start realizing that like that type of thing was dangerous. So there's a lot of stuff out there that we don't even know what the consequences are. And we probably won't for a while. And this is affecting us, and it's affecting the wildlife as well. Another cause of environmental species decline is light pollution. A lot of people don't think of this as a problem, but it is. It especially creatures that rely on circadian rhythms to like understand their environment, like what's going on. They use light to understand when to mate, when to migrate, when to eat, all sorts of things. And some of them, like reptiles, it actually like triggers certain processes in them. And we've been seeing, obviously, with the increase of population, the spread of human cities, that it is not as dark as it used to be. I mean, we can all probably understand that in the sense that try to find stars where you live, and unless you're in some like really dark, like middle of the country type place, you're probably not going to be able to see stars at all. This is a problem for insects, especially because they don't have the mechanisms that will help them regulate what they're supposed to be doing. There's certain moths that have to mate during very specific like moon cycles, and having all of these extra lights make it really hard for them to understand when to breed at appropriate times. Same with plants. This also affects plant growth. And if you mess up those cycles, they might end up mating and laying eggs at cold, or when the plants that they need are not flowering. So the things that they would rely on are not going to be there, and so the babies won't be able to actually hatch and grow effectively. So that's affecting a lot of those animals as well. It also affects marine mammals and marine animals. The light pollution from cities will actually make animals accidentally beach themselves because they think that they're like some animals fluoresce at night, and they'll think that they're supposed to be hunting something. It also triggers fish to mess up their migrations, because a lot of them do use the moon to migrate as well. There's a whole lot of effects that light pollution has on wildlife, and I think I'll probably do a full episode on it because it's very interesting. There's a lot of aspects to light pollution that affect not only the wildlife but also us. So I'll definitely do an episode on that because it is very interesting. Another aspect of human behavior that causes the extinction of animals is hunting and bycatch. Bycatch is specific mostly to marine animals, where a lot of fishermen will use like indiscriminate netting practices where they just like have one big net. Trawling is a huge culprit, I guess, of that, where they cast out this huge net and they either drag it along the bottom of the ocean or they drag it through the water column, and anything that swims in front of it is going to get picked up. And even if they're only hunting sardines, they're still going to catch turtles and marine mammals and jellyfish and all kinds of other creatures that were not meant to be caught in the net. And sometimes they just die getting trapped in the net. Sometimes they're pulled onto the boat and then they die there. Sometimes, occasionally, they get released back into the wild, but they can still have like stress damage and injuries from being wrapped in the nets. So the act of fishing can sometimes unintentionally kill a number of different species that were not meant to be hunted. And then, of course, there's normal hunting where people do sport hunting, trophy hunting, all kinds of activities that involve killing animals for fun, which I guess to each your own, but I don't get it. If you do want to do hunting, I would definitely say that you should probably do like game animals that are bred specifically for the purpose of hunting rather than going after endangered or almost extinct animals. But you know, that black market is quite lucrative, and if you want that ivory, that's what they're gonna do. But yeah, there is a huge market underground for animal parts, animal like taxidermy and all that stuff that encourage people to kill off species that are used just for trophies. And although there's a lot of movements around the world to ban or reduce the practices, it still is definitely a thing. A lot of people, if they really want to, they're still going to, even though it's illegal. So no matter if they ban it or not, there's still going to be people that break the law. There's also people that are hunting just because they're not even going after a specific animal. They're just like going out into the desert and shooting at anything that moves. So there are definitely people doing that. I'd argue that probably isn't the most impactful side of animal hunting. Though for trophy animals like rhinos and stuff like that, those are definitely the ones that are being wiped out almost indiscriminately by humans. But I like deer hunting is not really going to be nearly as damaging as like rhino elephant hunting. So there is also differences between species. There is also projects with scientists where certain animals are considered invasive species, and so they have hunting programs to help take out those invasive species, such as in New Zealand they have an issue with bush possums, and so you can actually get paid to go out and like hunt bush possums. But this is, if you are going to be hunting, it's very important to understand the law, understand what animals are okay and not okay to hunt. There are very, very steep penalties for hunting animals that are not appropriate for hunting. And yeah, there are ways to do so in a responsible manner, hunting during certain periods of time, hunting in certain areas and not others. But the biggest killer really of animals is climate change. Climate change, changing patterns of weather, changing regional heat patterns are changing animals' behaviors. They're changing their locations, affecting migration patterns. They're affecting food availability. They're affecting their mating successes. Animals require very specific conditions. With things like, especially like flying animals, birds, bees, insects of sorts, or things that are very temperature specific, like amphibians and reptiles, they're very, very susceptible to declines because of climatic changes. They are like, just for example, I have a gecko, and his tank has to be between 75 degrees and 80 degrees. And it has to have a temperature gradient where one side of the tank has to be about 75 degrees and the other side has to be about 80 degrees, because they need a spot to sun themselves and warm themselves up so they can digest properly and they absorb the nutrients that they need effectively. But then they need a colder spot so they can cool themselves down, and don't get too hot, but then also it helps them regulate their sleep cycle, because if it's too hot, they can't sleep as well. And there are some animals that are even more particular, like leopard geckos are considered very easy to care for because they're very forgiving with their temperature gradient. When I was researching pets to get before I got him, I was looking at this other type of gecko, which is like a really mini one, and they need like 85 to 90 degree temperatures, and if you don't have it exactly and like the humidity exactly, they get so stressed out that they die. And this is kind of what we're doing to animals on a broad scheme, where we're now making it so, depending on it very much varies based on where you're living. Some places are starting to get way more rain than they ever used to, are way more hot than they ever used to be, and some places are getting way more cold than they ever used to be, or way more dry than they used to be. And a lot of these animals, especially ones that can't migrate very fast, are struggling to survive because the temperatures that they needed are no longer able to support their bodies. They also are having their food sources be affected, their water accessibility be affected. They've been finding that creatures have actually been changing their altitudes. So animals that like colder weather are starting to move farther up the mountains because the areas that they're in are no longer cold enough for them to survive. It's very, very difficult for animals that are more stationary. Then some animals are able to just migrate, larger traveling mammals. But a lot of the smaller creatures can find it really hard to adapt to changing temperatures, changing land type. And it can make it also really hard for breeding purposes as well. If you have animals fleeing locations, it's going to be harder for you to find a mate. They sometimes just get killed by, when they move to these new locations, they have new predators they've never dealt with before. They won't have the food sources that they needed because now it's in a different location. there's all sorts of complications that come with moving to a new location that you've never had experience in. It's almost like if you suddenly got moved to a different country that you have no experience in. You wouldn't know the people, you wouldn't know the language, you wouldn't know, like, you might not be able to identify the food, you might not be able to identify what's a safe place to live. There's a whole bunch of impacts that come with not being able to live in the region that you were basically adapted to live in. Another example is like if I moved to the East Coast, like I would hate it because it would be frozen and I wouldn't have the type of climate that I'm used to. Let me check through. I'll look through the comments just to see, because I see you guys have been active. Make sure there wasn't a question. Yeah. One thing that Arcana, you asked, water systems or irrigation, runoff, those are also big things. Along with modification of the land, we also modify the waterways. A lot of fish are seeing declines because we have dammed natural rivers that they use to mate and to travel. And then also it affects the makeup of the river. Certain component, like there's very specific minerals and whatnot that exist in the water, and damming rivers can influence the type of makeup of the water, which can also affect animals. That's why you can't just put a fish in water and expect it to live. Like if you want to have an aquarium, you have to make adjustments to the water to make sure it matches the needs of the fish. You have to affect the temperature, the turbidity, which is how much particles are in the water, the salinity, the pH of it. Every animal requires very, very specific things, and that applies to marine and freshwater animals as well. So runoff and irrigation will also affect the water species, because you're going to run those pesticides into the water. You can also, fertilizers are also a big problem in marine ecosystems because they encourage algal growth. And in a closed water system, algal growth can literally take out the oxygen of those areas, and you can basically suffocate anything living in those regions because the algae overgrows and basically takes away all the oxygen in the water. In the ocean, it can also cause what are called red tides, which are toxic algal growths, and those are neurotoxic or biotoxic, one of the two, or both. And that can actually be hazardous for humans as well. You might see, if you live in the beach areas, a red tide warning, which means it's not safe for you to actually be in the ocean, because you can literally get poisoned by the algae. So the water systems, the irrigation, the farming goes beyond just the pesticides. It also is affected by the water and the runoff and everything like that, like you said. Let's see. Okay. So going back to some of the stats again, for birds right now, birds, bugs, and reptiles are arguably the most endangered creatures. As I said, all three of them are all three categories are very sensitive to changes. in the ecosystem, in food sources, in light conditions, in temperatures. And they've been finding staggering losses in all three of these groups of creatures. In the US and in Canada, they've been finding bird populations are down by 2.9 billion adult birds in every biome, across all biomes. Forests alone have lost about 1 billion birds. Grassland populations have declined by about 53%, or about 720 million birds. And more than 90% of these losses, about 2.5 billion birds, come from just 12 families, which include sparrows, blackbirds, warblers, finches, all of which are very, very important for plant health. A lot of these are pollinators, and they finches are particularly noteworthy because that is what Darwin used originally to investigate evolution, because he found that finches in, I want to say he was in Central America, but I don't remember exactly. He was examining all different species of finches, and he found that each species of finch had a different shaped beak that matched a specific shaped flower or specific plant. And so that was what made him realize that animals were being modified based on the types of food that they had access to or were accessing. So a lot of these creatures, a lot of these birds are very common. Sparrows, blackbirds, warblers, finches, they're found in almost every state in the United States. They're also found in Mexico. They're also found in the South America, Canada. There's also their own species in Europe and Asia. And all of these birds have been seeing significant losses. With reptiles and amphibians, more than 41% of amphibians, which are toads, salamanders, and what am I forgetting? Frogs. They've been declining by 41%. And turtles are specifically the most endangered out of reptiles and amphibians. 61% are threatened or already have gone extinct. And particularly sea turtles are at risk because they're one of the they're being affected very heavily by bycatch, where they get caught in the nets that are being dragged. They also get killed a lot by I forgot what they're called, ghost lines, ghost fishing, which is sometimes when fishermen's nets get stuck, they just cut it off and let it go into the ocean. And a lot of animals will die that way because they get entangled in these nets and they either drown or they starve. And sea turtles are particularly susceptible to this because they're not very mobile. They don't have the capacity to, they don't have hands, so they can't get stuff off of them. And then they're also solitary. So a lot of them die because they get stuck in nets, whether it's from fishing or from just ghost nets. They also have been dying a lot because of plastic pollution. The plastic bags in the water look a lot like jellyfish, and they think that the plastic bags are jellyfish, so they eat them. And I have a visitor. And then in the oceans themselves, another species that's in decline that's incredibly impactful is coral. Corals are about half of all species of coral extinction right now. which is incredibly dangerous because they host, I think it's like 85% of all species in the ocean, and like 90% of people around the world rely on species that are found in coral reefs. And coral's biggest killer is heat in the ocean. When the ocean gets too hot, they expel the algae that gives them their color, and they basically just leave behind the calcium carbonate skeleton, which is where you get the term bleaching, a coral bleaching event. It's where large swaths of the corals have ejected their algae and are now basically just skeletons of the base that made them. Of the 17,900 marine species and marine plants and animals that have been assessed, over 1,500 of them are at risk of extinction, and 41% of them are considered threatened. So the oceans are particularly in danger, which is not good because the land species, of course we need them, but the ocean is arguably the thing that keeps us alive, because having a living ocean allows us to have the oxygen that we need. It also allows us to have the food that we rely on. Majority of the countries around the world rely to some large degree seafood and sea animals to survive. So losing the ocean would be incredibly dangerous for us. Thankfully, only about 50% of the wildlife in the ocean are being threatened, but that's just what we know right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if this escalates once the temperatures start changing more significantly. Another creature I want to highlight too are bees. A lot of people think, oh, well, like honeybees are doing fine. Honeybees are fine. Honeybees are human cultivated insects. But bees themselves, there's hundreds of thousands of species of bees around the world. And just like the birds, they're very specifically modified for specific plants. And most plants, I think it was like 80% of plants rely on bugs or birds to some degree for pollination. And we have been seeing a dramatic decline in bees. And so whenever people say like, oh, we're losing the bees, I've always heard that like, oh, well, we have honeybees, so we're fine. But it's all the other species that are in danger of us losing them. In 2024, we found that 24 bee species declined by 22%, and some dropped as much as 39%, and that was within a year. We've been seeing, just for bugs alone, across the world, there's been a bug biomass, which is like all of them all together, like number-wise, declines between 1% and 5% year on year, every year. And then flying insects have faced declines of up to 6.6%. In Puerto Rico, they've lost 98% of their ground bug species and 80% of their tree bug species in just the last 35 years. In the US, we've seen an 83% beetle decline in the last 45 years. And then in Germany, they have specific reserves for insects. And even there, where it's highly protected, they've seen a 75% decline in the last 30 years. So we have been seeing a massive decrease in a number of species that we heavily rely on, that are very important for us to survive as a human species. And so it's important for us to know this, because we can start to adapt our behavior to help the animals. Granted, this is an uphill battle. This is not going to be something that we can single-handedly solve with one solution, one size fits all. There's going to be a lot of stuff that we have to do to stem this problem and make to reverse the losses that we're seeing. But there are still things that you can do. Number one of the best ways that you can help local species is by, if you can, planting native plants. Even if you don't have a big yard, like putting potted plants out that are native flowers, native, preferably things that have like flora on them, flowers and stuff. But finding out what are local native species and finding the plants that work with those animals. Like look up what likes to live in your area, what type of birds, what type of bees, what type of butterflies, insects, even like lizards, reptiles. Like try to find out who lives in your neighborhood and then start trying to set up little ecosystems in your front yard, backyard, side yard with things that they like, because that can make a huge difference. There's a garden in Japan that I think it's like I think it's an acre, but they have like 1,000 native plant species in there, and it hosts like hundreds of different animals just from that small little space. So it is possible to create a tiny little haven in your own backyard. You can also make little bug motels where you get like a box and then put different like sticks and like the tube things that on toilet paper, just little things for it to hide in, and you can use that to help bugs. For birds, putting out natural or putting out seeds that are specifically designated for birds in your area. You can look that up online. They'll have guidance on how to feed like native species. I do that. I have a hummingbird feeder, and then I also have a seed feeder for birds to use. Another thing would be to avoid using pesticidal or herbicidal sprays. There are natural ways to you have to look it up based on which type of bug you're trying to keep away, but there are a lot of natural remedies that reduce the instances of certain bugs, and it can help both you and the animals, because you also don't really want to be exposed to those types of sprays. Those are not good for you. Buying organic food, I know a lot of people don't think that it makes a difference, but it makes a slight difference. It does help because it encourages the production of those goods when they see an increase in buyer volumes, and it shows that there is a demand for that. So it can encourage future production of organic goods, and it's again usually more safe because organic, typically, depending on where you live, they're required to not spray at all. So it can, again, be beneficial for your health to do that. Another big one is keeping your cats indoors. Cats are one of the biggest killers of small birds, of small rodents, of creatures that need or that are small enough for your cats to kill. Also, it'll keep your cats safe if you live somewhere where there's hawks or coyotes. They're going to be potential victims of those animals. So keeping your cats indoors is a huge benefit to the ecosystem, especially if you live in Australia. Also, not as big of an issue because dogs aren't as prolific hunters as cats are, but keeping your dogs inside as well, or at least not letting them chase after animals out in public. Another thing too is try to reduce your plastic waste, because plastic is another huge killer of animals. Plastic is eaten by creatures. It is like suffocating animals. It also carries toxins and carries that into the water. So try and reduce your plastic consumption as much. Another thing really is to learn, to know what's happening in your area, understand what efforts are currently underway. Maybe you can find things that you identify with that you can participate in. There's all sorts of restoration projects, restoring native habitats. You can participate by like going and joining them, planting the plants, native plants and stuff like that. Also participating in like watcher societies, like bird watching, bug watching, stuff like that, which can help scientists keep track of populations, and understanding what's happening, like a difference, because number one, you are now going to be more aware of what's happening, and it'll also kind of introduce you to other ways that you can help in your own capacity. You never know, like there could be things that stand out to you that you're like, oh, I have that skill, let me see if I can apply this and help scientists, help animals, help wildlife, plants, whatever, and apply my knowledge to those areas so I can improve the world in some way. Also talking about it, writing about it, getting the word out there about what's happening is a huge aspect as well. Because what I've come to find is a lot of people do care. It's just they don't realize, one, what's actually happening. They don't realize how bad it is. But then they also don't know what to do about it. A lot of people feel very like, how am I supposed to help? Like about it. There's like, we're already cooked. But talking about it and talking about small solutions can create waves that turn into larger solutions, that turn into laws and other things that help change in much larger ways. Like we have had incredible experiences with recovery in like we're killing off a lot of animals, but we have had successes in Yellowstone. They had completely killed off all of the wolves, and it trashed the ecosystem because it allowed the population of deer to explode, and they trampled the riverbeds. It changed the course of the rivers. It made the beavers leave because they didn't really have the quiet streams anymore. They're just wide rivers. The bears weren't able to traverse the same regions anymore. Like there is a whole slew of impacts. It's very, very fascinating if you ever want to look into it. But they returned the wolves in the 90s, I think. And the ecosystem went back to normal. They brought the deer populations back down. The beavers came back. The rivers fixed themselves. There even like the trees started to grow back because the deer had basically like torn out the trees as well because they ran out of grasses to eat. So we have the capacity to make an impact. We just have to do it a little bit at a time because obviously this is a widespread worldwide issue. So we have to, I mean, really the biggest thing is we have to know that it's not hopeless. There's a lot that we can do. There's a lot that we should do. And it's really something that we shouldn't give up on because, as I said at the beginning, we are not living in a vacuum. We are not the end-all be-all of species. We need the other species as much as they need us. We will die without bees. We will die without lizards. We will die without fish. It is traumatic to lose as many species as we are losing. And so we have to do something about it. And we can't just give up saying that it's already too late. So changing our mindset about this, changing our attitude about this is going to be a huge, talking about it is such an important issue because the more people understand about the issue, the more we'll be able to actually see the solutions to the problem in the first place. So I have a poem that I thought I'd end with. That one focuses on the idea of silence in the environment, because, as I said, the crickets have gone quiet, the birds are gone, the insects are no longer sound like they're not there anymore, and to the degree that they used to be. And so I wrote this poem inspired by that, and the last stanza, just for a background, is made up of phrases and quotes from Silent Spring. So this was very much inspired by Rachel Carson's book, which Rachel Carson's book has been so influential to me, and I always bring it up because it's the book that triggered the very first environmental movement. Her book was so inspiring, so mind-opening, so mind-blowing that she single-handedly started the very first environmental movement. And to this day, the environmental marches that were triggered by her books were some of the largest in I don't know if it's in history, but like in our recent history in the US. So it's proof that you can make a difference, even if it's just a book, even if it's just a talk online, even if it's just a conversation. You have no idea how much of an impact you can actually have. So I wrote this for her and for the animals that are now disappearing. This is called A Fable for Tomorrow, which is named after the first chapter of her book. Chorus of the gods capered through vast Cyan, descending in humming, warbling great clouds. Landscapes blessed with processions of song, as tender leaves wobbled like Zephyr's applause. Bubbly buzz stirred swishing, sweeping grasses, peppered in carotenoid, insecticyan, melanine. In misted meadows came bellows, chattering. Cries rose and fell between croaks and chirps. Winds whisper flecked with scratch and scurry, announcing existence in shuffles and flutters, in spectacles of range, of source, hue, and tone, celebrating the return of carols and vernal choir. Symphonic summer songs stalked seared sky, warbling, trilling, filled oxygen with twittering tune. Rose as heat with the squabble, the barks, the talk, the humid exhale of tantric tradition and behavior. Flamboyant fall songs synced to collecting leaves. The cause, whistles, calls, like schools in the halls, painted into air the stories of the ancestors before. Anthems told of the everlasting flow of now and then, when spirits intertwined with squeaks and howls, when voices of fathers emerged in snarls and roars, when lullabies of mothers arose from nickers and purrs, when sound spoke with the signal of the wild alive. Now, cacophonous cadence of creation crumples to a chilled, stilled sigh from the frostbitten skies, speaking with emptiness, bitterness, vacancy, demise swelling like the lunar hush cast upon snow, spilling out soundlessly across gelid frosted loam. The mutism struck down the expression of soul, muzzled mortal memory condensing like cold breath. The larynx of the forest snapped under the weight of built-up ice from fallen tears of speechless gods. There is a quiet settling across soggy, stillborn land. A hollow agonal wheeze devoid of emotion's cognition, breaking the shattered land of verglas and sticks. As the suffocating dry nip thawed into mellow melt, cloaks of suspension withdrew, exposing ribs and skulls. Fallow fields lay in wait for the crackling of emergence. From the ground should come resurrection and flesh. Yet, crumbs of what was lie within wet ghosts of snow. Exposed sludge lays motionless, blighted, fruitless, begging for intrusions of green fingers and padded toes. Instead, only feel browned withering, unperturbed soils, The rustling giants and babbling highways fail to revive. Nights bring no hooting, no chittering, no peeping, while dawn brings no chattering, no yipping, no crows. Creaking like an outgrown swing, the world persists alone. The repeated refrains of nature were infinitely healing. An assurance, dawn followed night, spring followed winter. But an evil spell, a shadow of death, an irreversible chain, a grim specter of maladies has crept in almost unnoticed, and is instead a stark reality we all shall soon come to know. No witchcraft, no enemy action has suppressed rebirth. We believed we could lay down such barrages of poisons upon the surface of the earth without making it unfit for all. This war against nature is inevitably a war against ourself. The more clearly we focus on the wondrous reality of earth, the more clearly we will see we have done this to ourselves. And if we do not, we shall find our springs arrive in silence.
By examining his own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the course of the Cold War.
Art muscle. It was a way of making me feel that they were a part of me.
You see it on the bridge. Wait, how they get it? If the government had to change the screw in the bridge, they had to shut it down. They got state troopers out there. They got lanes closed. They got their strange machines. How did they get up there?